All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us to Riverwood's presentation on the benefits of a New Hampshire retirement. My name is Lisa Clark, and I will be your host today. And I'll be introducing our guests shortly. Just a few things to start with in terms of housekeeping rules. We have everybody on mute today, but we certainly welcome your questions, and you can submit your questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, or it could be at the side or the top of your screen, but it is labeled Q&A. If you type your questions in there, we will be addressing them mostly at the end of the presentation, and unless they're relevant to the kind of current slide that we're on. We always love to hear from you in terms of suggestions on how we can improve our webinars. And if you have an idea for a future topic that you'd like to hear as well, we always welcome suggestions on that. So before we launch into the main topic here, just a little bit about Riverwoods, who's sponsoring this webinar this morning. We are a community comprised of 3 communities of continuing care retirement communities. The original community being here in Exeter, New Hampshire. Our second community that we opened, Riverwoods, Manchester, and then the third community we opened is in Durham, New Hampshire. So some of you are local and you're familiar with these locations. However, some of you are not. So we welcome you to check us out. And today you're going to be hearing about all the fantastic things there are to do in the state of New Hampshire, which are kind of sprinkled throughout some of our neighboring towns where our communities are located. So a little bit about the type of service that Riverwoods provides. If you are not familiar with the term CCRC, it stands for Continuing Care Retirement Community. And we really are an insurance product. So it's not real estate that you buy when you come here. We are providing the full spectrum of care from independent living through assisted living and nursing. Because we are an insurance product, we are regulated by the state of New Hampshire and need to report our financial performance to the state on an annual basis. Our model allows you to prepay for potential assisted living or nursing needs. And when you come to live here, you do pay an entry fee and then a monthly fee to live here. A portion of both are tax deductible, being eligible as a prepaid medical expense. When you come to live at a community like Riverwoods, you always come living independently or able to live independently. We take care of all the maintenance. We help with transportation, winter if you need it. We've got a boatload of activities, fitness programs, education programs, and a lot of socialization if that's what you desire, which is so healthy to the aging process. And really, we allow you to kind of stay in control of your life, but have that safety net of the full spectrum of healthcare. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you our first speaker. Our presenter is Sean McDonald. And Sean, if you, for those of you who are living in New Hampshire, you probably have a familiar face here on the screen. Sean is a native of New England. He's lived elsewhere in the country through some of his assignments within broadcasting, but he grew up in Malden in a family of 5 kids, and has been with WMUR now for over 20 years. So WMUR is the ABC affiliate within New Hampshire. And Sean hosts not only he's an anchor for News 9 Daybreak, but also he's a host of New Hampshire Chronicle, which is a great program to learn about all the fun things happening in New Hampshire. He did have a few stints in Boston, Missoula, Montana, and Yakima, Washington. So if anybody's joining from those areas today, you may see a familiar face. Sean got his Bachelor in Arts from Providence College and his master's from BU. He's a guitar player, piano player, musician, and also enjoys hockey and golf.
Boy, this makes me sound like I'm such a well-rounded person right there. Thank you very much. I will say that I have 2 kids now, and after I have my kids, I play less guitar and less golf, by the way, just for the record.
Of course, of course.
Although yesterday, we'll say, even though in the middle of summer, we went skating. So there are a couple of indoor rinks. We did. It was a very nice way to cool off. As you mentioned, yeah.
So Sean, I'm going to introduce Erik, and then we're going to come back and let you kind of go into your list of temptations of things to see. Our second presenter will be Erik Loranger. And Erik is Senior Vice President of White Mountain Wealth Management, Raymond James in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Erik's a native of Exeter, so he has not strayed far from home. And has a lovely wife and 3 kids who are going through the same school system that Erik went through. So he's in that stage of life where he's staying super busy with sports and other activities. They're a family that skis. And Erik also helps give back to the community through some of his work with the Independence Museum here in Exeter, as well as his Alumni Association, the Rotary Club, and the Chamber of Commerce. And his role really as a wealth management specialist is to help guide his clients as they navigate through the various stages of life, from wealth accumulation to distribution of income as they reach retirement years. So we thought Erik would be an appropriate person to share with us today. When you come live in New Hampshire, retire in New Hampshire, what are some of the considerations and advantages to choosing New Hampshire as your state of retirement? So we're going to move on and get back to Sean, and Sean's going to share with us what are the hidden gems, Sean, in New Hampshire?
There are so many of them. It's going to be hard to kind of encapsulate all of this, encapsulate it. But again, thanks for having me here. It's one of my joys of working for the New Hampshire Chronicle show is to see some of the things that not everybody even knows about. Even when you do a Google search of what to do in the state of New Hampshire, sometimes you don't see all of these. So we've had a chance to see many of them, and I discover more all the time, which is one of the best parts of this job. One of the best things about living in the state of New Hampshire, I can tell you that most people will tell you this, not only do we have the seasons, of course, we get beautiful fall, winter, spring, summer, which we're in now, but we get to experience different things like the seacoast in the state of New Hampshire. We have that. And then you can go to the mountains in the state of New Hampshire, which are beautiful. The White Mountain National Forest is a gorgeous place to go take a drive or a walk. But of course, the lakes region as well. We have hundreds of lakes here in the state of New Hampshire, many with public beaches, many with hotels, great places to visit. So if you've never been to the state of New Hampshire, you can experience all these things in one state, which is one of the best things about the state of New Hampshire. Let's start at the seacoast here. I want to show you a couple of things here. One of the real hidden gems that we found here at New Hampshire Chronicle out is off the coast, is about 7.5 miles off the coast of New Hampshire. You're going to find an island called Star Island. This is part of the Isles of Shoals. It's a group of islands off the coast, but on this, you can see in the corner of this picture here is the Oceanic Hotel. It's been there for, I don't know, about 100 years, 100 plus years now. And you can actually take day trips out of Portsmouth, hop on the Thomas Layton or a number of ferries, and you can go check out the hotel. You can do a walk around the island, check out the Gosport Chapel out there. It's a lot of history out there. You can do some kayaking, as you can see, or some swimming. The water might be a little bit chilly, but you can do that. And you can actually stay out there overnight. They have a nonprofit that runs that hotel now. So it is a wonderful day trip from Portsmouth Harbor. Portsmouth has a number of things, as you guys know, but it is a great place to go check out. And you can do whale watching out of Rye Harbor as well. So there's a number of seacoast activities that aren't far from the location. So it is a great place to check out if you've never done that before. But not to be limited to the seacoast, we've got our mountains as well. I was just talking about, I was up on Mount Washington probably about a week ago. This is what you're looking at. One of the more unique ways to see the state of New Hampshire. This is the Cog Railway right here. If you've never heard of this thing, it runs obviously with a cog that keeps it from going down the hill, but it goes all the way up the highest peak in the Northeast, 6,288 feet. Yeah, Mount Washington, home to the world's worst weather. For a long time, it held the world's fastest land speed record at 231 miles per hour. So most days, though, it is very calm up there, and you can take the Cog Railway up there and visit the peak. It is a little chilly, so bring an extra layer if you do go up there. By the way, you can go up there, by the way, on foot. You can also hike up there. There are any number of trails that'll take you to the top of Mount Washington, or you can also take the Mount Washington Auto Road as well. You can drive up or take a tour up there. But if you've never stood on top of a mountain this tall and just looked out on a clear day, they say you can see all the way to Boston. Okay, so that gives you an idea. But it is a beautiful area of the state. All of the White Mountains are beautiful, but the presidentials especially are beautiful. And that's an easy way to just go up there and check it out. You don't need to be an avid hiker. You can take the Cog Railway up there as well. It is a really neat spot up there. It's been around since 1869. They made some adjustments and improvements along the way. So don't worry about it. The whole thing's about a 3-hour tour. Down the road, by the way.
Yeah, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say this is the Cog Railway is just such an iconic New Hampshire experience. And just the image of it. I mean, you can see that it's from a prior century or two. Do you know what seasons they operate this in? Like how late in the season they go?
So they'll go right through foliage season. They used to have a ski train as well, if you wanted to do that. So they do run some trains in the wintertime. I don't know if they go all the way to the summit, but basically through the warmer months and then through the foliage season, you can check this out. It's a great way to go up. It is a little steep, but don't worry, you can sit the whole way. But yeah, again, it's only about a 3-hour trip, and it's a lot of fun if you've never done the Cog Railway before. But just down the road, I was going to mention is the famous Mount Washington Hotel. So you can check that out, maybe go get lunch there or something, and then do a ride up the Cog Railway as well. So it's a wonderful spot in New Hampshire. Not far from there, by the way, the famous Lakes region. You're looking at Moultonborough. This right here is called Castle in the Clouds, a wonderful spot. And again, one of the best views in the state of New Hampshire. If you take a look at this, so we're looking at it from an aerial shot, but the other way you can see Lake Winnipesaukee, which is the largest lake in the state of New Hampshire, and many other lakes as well. This was built by Thomas Plant. He's made his money in shoes, and he built this house in 1914. It's a mansion that eventually the family left. It was taken over by a nonprofit, and now it's open as a museum. So you can drive up here just a little bit shy of there and take a shuttle up and take tours of this wonderful mansion that has gorgeous views. By the way, it was known for being a high-tech house back in the day in 1914. I believe it had what do you call that stuff with when you vacuum? It's self-contained vacuum cleaners in there and outlets and all this stuff. It was a really high-tech home for its time back in 1914. And it had a carriage house below it, which now has been turned into a restaurant. So you can sit out on this patio at the restaurant. They have events there and you can get lunch there, and it's a beautiful view. And there's also, a lot of people don't realize this, a whole trail system there as well, with a pretty large waterfall, so you can take walks around there. It is a wonderful area year round. The trails are open year round. The house is open in the warmer months, but if you want to check out the Lakes region and see Lake Winnipesaukee in style, go up to Castle in the Clouds. That's one way to do it. It is gorgeous up there, I can tell you that.
Beautiful.
I'm going to show you something else. One of the things that New Hampshire was known for over the years are the grand hotels. Many of them have burned down, but there are a couple that do survive. There's one on the seacoast, the Mount Washington Hotel, which is near Mount Washington. And this one right here, this is the Mountain View Grand Hotel in Whitefield. We got to stand on the porch of this hotel as we shot the show. That's actually in the very top there as part of their spa. But we stood on the porch, and when you look around, it is 180 degrees, probably more, of just mountains all around you. It is beautiful out there to stay there. It's got all kinds of neat stuff there and a lot of history as well. But one of my favorite stops, and it has a beautiful spa. Most of these hotels nowadays have these huge spas, so you can go spend the weekend there. Some of the fun events that they do include live farm animals and axe throwing, if you want to give that a whirl too. So they have all kinds of fun events, but it's one of the grand hotels that still exists today, and anybody can stay there. And there's lots of little day trips you can do out of there as well. But I love that. The Mountain View Grand Hotel is beautiful, beautiful spot there.
And this is a beautiful shot, which looks like it was taken in the spring or summer, which kind of, prior picture you had was a fall foliage shot. So it just goes to show that pretty much any season you can find beauty in up in the mountains region of New Hampshire.
Yeah, again, getting back to the fact that we have the 4 seasons, some people just come up for winter activities. We have a lot of skiers that will come up and just do winters up here. Some people come up because they have summer homes here, so they're the summer. But foliage season is probably one of our biggest seasons, one of the busiest seasons here in New Hampshire, because it's beautiful up here. People love to come up here and not only see the leaves, but check out some of the local hotels, the museums, and take a lot of pictures too, right? You see pictures everywhere.
Yes,
No doubt
beautiful.
about it. That's one place to do it. Great food up here. There's a million restaurants. I couldn't possibly sum them up, but this is one of the neat ones. If you head up 93, which is the main highway through the center of the state there, you go to Woodstock, which is about in the middle of the state. It's up in the mountains. And you can find this here. This is the Cafe Lafayette dinner train. They will serve you a 5-course meal on board this restored old dining car here. It is a really neat way to not only eat a meal, but also see New Hampshire. You would imagine you can kind of see the foliage there in that picture, that during foliage season, this is pretty popular, but it is pretty neat. We have a bunch of train systems right nearby that you can take. The Hobo Railroad as well, which is a scenic railroad, the Conway, scenic railroad as well in North Conway, New Hampshire. They run all kinds of trains. If you're a train person, there are lots of those up here. I should note, by the way, that if you like to eat and move at the same time like you would here on the dinner car, you can also get dinner cruises on the big lakes, on Lake Sunapee and Lake Winnipesaukee, so you can dine in style that way. And also the Conway Scenic Railway offers meals as well. So there's a couple of different ways you could do that, but this one's kind of neat, a 5-course kind of high-end meal served on board a train, just like you'd see like an Agatha Christie movie, I think, right there, but it's kind of neat.
Fantastic. Oh, that looks really fun.
It is a lot of fun. That's a neat one right there. And you know what they do a lot in the fall? They meander around. People come up here and check out the different scenery, but they'll also go to some of the local country stores as well. There are a million of these country stores around the state of New Hampshire that are wonderful little stops to pick up trinkets, if you will, souvenirs, and also a lot of good food as well. This one's Caliph's Country Store, which we visited for the show. It's in Barrington, closer to the seacoast, Exeter, Durham area, that type of thing. You can see that gentleman there cutting a very large wheel of cheese. They're known for their cheeses and their pickles, which you find at local general stores as well. That store dates back to 1869. It's been going ever since then. So that gives you an idea how far back some of these communities date, how much history there is in some of these towns. But a neat little store there. These are great to visit any time of year, but I love going there in the fall. Everybody goes in there. You can get some cider in there, or some of the cheese, or some of the really good food that they offer. But it's a great way to tour the state as well, hitting different country stores along the way. But that was a good one. Caliph's is a great store, big popular destination. If you're really interested, I think you can get their stuff online as well. Summertime right now, right? So a lot of folks head to the beach, right? We do have beaches here in New Hampshire, a lot of public beaches. This is the seacoast of New Hampshire. Each June, they bring in professional sandcastle sculptors. You can see one of them here. I don't know how they do this. They're really amazing. That is just water and sand. Here's a little inside tip for you, by the way, though. They bring in a special sand from a granite quarry. This is not regular sand. It is a very fine sand, but it is just sand and water. So in June, they bring in these sand sculptors, and they'll work for, oh gosh, maybe 3 or 4 days, and then create these unbelievable sculptures right there on the beach. It's open for the public to come view, and you can check them out for probably a week or so. But it is one of the neat ways to see Hampton Beach. It's a very popular area of the state because it has a beautiful beach. It has a kind of boardwalk area, has live music, fireworks in the summertime, all kinds of restaurants. So it's one of the most popular spots in the summertime in the state of New Hampshire. And it's pretty close, if you know the area at all. If you don't, it's right close to Maine and to Massachusetts as well, as it sits on the seacoast. So it gets a lot of tourists in there. Well, but that's a great spot to go if you want to get some seafood. Maybe you want to get some lobsters or some clams. It is a great spot for food as well. But the Sand Sculpting Classic is a great excuse to go check out the beach. So I love it there.
That's fun. The artistry, because I live near there, so I always try to check it out. The artistry is really incredible of the detail and of the designs that people do and the scale in which they build these sand castles.
I still don't know how they do it. Some of them, yeah, they're 8, 9, 10 feet tall, and they stand for the whole week. They can even withstand a little bit of rain as well. I don't know how they do it.
Right.
Beautiful. So right nearby is Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We talked about that a little bit. This is the old port of New Hampshire, right next to Kittery, Maine. And what you're looking at right here is called a gundalo. And back about 200, 150 years ago, this is how they would carry cargo up and down the Piscataqua River there to get from one place to the other. And they restored one of these, and you can actually take a gundalo cruise right there in the Piscataqua River. It's in Portsmouth Harbor. It is a beautiful area of the state. You get to see some of the old buildings. You can see the Navy shipyard from there. Fun fact, by the way, you get to see the old Navy prison as well. If you know Portsmouth at all, there's this behemoth. There's this old classic looking building, gray building. It's been dormant for years, but it was once called the Alcatraz of the East. I know it sounds kind of scary, but it is a beautiful building that'll take you by on the gundalo cruises there. You can take a meal with you as well and head out for the night. It's a great way to see the harbor. It's a great way to hang out with friends. It is a fun cruise, and it leaves again right from Portsmouth Harbor. If you want to check that out, that's one way to do it. It takes you out for a couple hours and you ride around, but really neat. It's a restored gundalo. One of those things on the show that I had never heard of until I got to do a story about it, but it was fun.
And there's some unique, or I should say beautiful gardens near there too, in Prescott Park as well.
Prescott Park is beautiful. It has live theater in the summertime. So if you want to see a live show there, but yeah, it's a great space to just walk around. And right near, of course, the famous Strawberry Bank Museum, which has historical buildings, and in the wintertime has skating too. So it's a really neat spot at Portsmouth there. And it's a good spot to just walk around, or you can drive up and check it out too. All right, next up here on our tour of New Hampshire, we're heading to Lake Winnipesaukee. This is the largest lake in the state of New Hampshire. It has many communities on it, many public beaches as well. What you're looking at right there is the MS Mount Washington, and this takes daily cruises in the warmer months. It sits idle in the wintertime. You can do guided tours. They do dinner tours. There are brunch cruises if you want to do one of those on the weekends. There are 5 ports around Lake Winnipesaukee. Takes about, gosh, I can't remember the last time I was there. Maybe it takes about half an hour to get in between one port to the other. But you can hang out on the top deck. You can go below. There's a full bar. Again, they do have the dinner cruises as well. One of the neat things about this, if you know the state of New Hampshire, you already know this, but in the wintertime, Lake Winnipesaukee, this massive lake, freezes over, and they call that ice in. And in the springtime, it's a big guessing game of when ice out will be. Ice out is declared when the MS Mount Washington can reach all 5 of her ports. It's usually around mid-April or so, but it depends on the weather. But it is really neat. And on the right-hand side of your screen there, what you're looking at look like real sailboats. They do, but these are mini sailboats, and these are used up in Wolfboro, which is also on Lake Winnipesaukee, and usually probably once or twice a week, these guys come out and they race these really high-end, antique, in some cases, but mini sailboats on one of the lakes up there. It is one of the neatest things I've ever seen because of the intensity of these guys. Most of them are retired. They've got these the big boats are probably 3 or 4 feet long, and they race them around these things. And they actually use the wind in some cases. They try to catch the wind on the sails there, and it's a fun thing to watch if you're into sailboats. In fact, the Sailboat Museum is also up in Wolfboro, so it's neat to check those out. But a lot of the guys that work with the Sailboat Museum race their sailboats up there in Wolfboro. So if you're into the water, there are plenty of things to do. In the wintertime, by the way, you can also sail on skates as well, if that suits your needs.
Fantastic.
You mentioned Exeter before, so we're heading back down to Exeter real quick. This is the American Independence Museum, a really neat little gem there in Exeter. What you're looking at there in the pictures, we visited on a day that they have a summer camp where reenactors come in, and these are kids, and they will dress up as a character from the 1800s, and they will be that character for the entire week of the summer camp. It's a lot of fun. Kids are into the colonial times. Love that. Of course, New Hampshire, one of the original 13 colonies, and this is what they celebrate here, the American Independence Museum. You can take public tours. You can go through the historic buildings. They've got something called the Folsom Tavern there, which George Washington visited in 1789 and had breakfast there. The story is, though, he was late and could only have breakfast, but he actually visited there. And they do have the American Independence Festival in the town of Exeter, which is based at the American Independence Museum. And they celebrate that not on July 4th, but on July 16th. And that's because the copy of the newly signed Declaration of Independence didn't arrive in Exeter until the 16th when it was read aloud. So that is when they celebrate Independence Day there in Exeter. But there's a lot of history of the town of Exeter. It's a great town to walk around or check out the museum as well. But that summer camp is really neat. I know a couple of kids there that really love to do that camp. You get to be a colonial character for a week. They have a blast.
That's a great
Ton
idea.
It is a neat idea, right? I loved it. There's lots of theater venues in the state of New Hampshire, a million of them. Great summer theater as well, and some old classic theaters. But this one here is one of the newer ones. This is the SNHU Arena. It's in downtown Manchester. If you're on the highway, just look for the Civic Center signs. And they do all kinds of big shows there. They got a wrestling event coming up, if you're into that type of thing, concerts and that type of thing. What you're looking in here on the left-hand side of your screen, that's myself and Erin Falo. She's the co-host of the show. And we were, I believe, reading The Night Before Christmas with the Boston Pops before the show started. Obviously, they hadn't gotten there yet. We were there for a mic check. But the Boston Pops will come in every year, usually about mid-December, and they do their Christmas show there. Very well attended. People love that show because it's sing-alongs, and Keith Lockhart and the Boston Pops are there. A lot of folks from the Boston Symphony Orchestra play in that. So it is one of the neat things to do around the holidays, and we get to participate in that probably every other year or so. So it's a great place to see a show. And if you ever want to see the Boston Pops, mid-December, check that out. It's a lot of fun. All right, what else we got here? The ice cream trail. So the state does these kind of trails to drum up business around the state, and they're a lot of fun. You can hop in the car, or you can hop in the van with a bunch of people and check this out. This one's called the New Hampshire Ice Cream Trail. It is brought to you by the New Hampshire Dairy Council, as you might imagine. There are a million ice cream places in the state of New Hampshire, and everybody loves ice cream, right? So you got to check it out. The Puritan here in Manchester. I think that one up there was the Sugar House up in, oh gosh, was that Westmoreland, I believe, where we're having one of their wonderful ice cream concoctions. But it is one of the neat ways to see the state. If you're looking for an excuse to kind of travel from town to town, why not do it with ice cream, right? And might I recommend, we have Moose here in the state of New Hampshire. Try the Moose Tracks ice cream, fudge swirl with mini peanut butter cups. It is delicious. I promise you're going to love it. But lots of great ice cream treats out there await you in the state of New Hampshire in the summertime. I love that. I love those pictures right there. Everybody liking their ice cream.
And I might add, these are all residents of the various Riverwoods communities in Exeter, Durham, and Manchester. So we do take field trips for ice cream, definitely.
I don't blame them. I'm sure they're pretty popular. Oh, where are we now? This is the New Hampshire wine. It's actually called the Wine and Cheese Trail, more officially by the state, but they do have a wine trail. There are lots of wineries here in the state of New Hampshire. A lot of them are newer, but some of them are pretty established. So they're starting to actually grow their own grapes and use their own grapes to make wine. So it is a really neat. The picture right here is kind of interesting. This is the Gilmanton Winery in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. It's about midway through the state, about the middle of the state, and it sits inside the former home of author Grace Metalius. Now, does that name ring a bell? She wrote Peyton Place, the famous novel Peyton Place that was later made into a movie. So that home right there has been turned into a winery there in Gilmanton. It is a lot of fun to be able to get out there and taste what is grown here in New Hampshire. This is one way to do it. There's actually one winery that will allow people to come in and stomp on the grapes if you want to do that. They don't actually use it for the wine. You just get to stomp on the grapes. There's another winery, though, that will let you come in and pick some of the grapes because they need somebody to do the manual labor, and you get a bottle of wine or a couple of bottles of wine for your work, for your labor for the day. But that's one way to earn a bottle of wine if you want to check that out. But there are lots of wineries popping up and craft breweries that are popping up around the state of New Hampshire. So those are becoming far more common. And again, a neat way to see the state. And a lot of them serve food as well. So you can kind of go there for lunch and check out the wine as well. But I just couldn't possibly tell you how many other places there are to visit in the state of New Hampshire. This is just some of them. It is, every part of the state has something unique to check out. They have museums, theaters, places to take hikes, you name it. It really is. I moved here now, 22, 23 years ago, and I've had so much fun. And I'm so glad that I live here in the state of New Hampshire because I've grown to appreciate so much more activity because of it.
That's great. Anything left on your list that you haven't seen that you're waiting to do?
a skydiving maybe.
Ah,
Ooh.
nice.
No, I don't think I'm going to do that, actually. That's okay. People want me to do that. But actually, yeah, there's a lot of trails. I've become a big hiker as I get older. So, yeah, there's a lot of trails I want to try. And there are actually 48 4,000 footers in the state of New Hampshire, and I've only done maybe 5 or 6 of them. So I have a lot more to go.
That's great. Well, thank you. This is a great list of things to see. I've lived here about a little over 30 years, and there's a lot of the things you shared today I haven't seen yet. So, so this has been fun for me to see all the things that I've been missing. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Yes, I realized I need to take a few more vacation days to get out there and see a couple of those.
Good. All right. Well, we're gonna now transition from the fun stuff to the business side. As I introduced Erik Loranger earlier, who's represents White Mountain Wealth Management, Erik's going to share with us a little bit more about what are some of the kind of the financial benefits to moving into the state of New Hampshire. Some of you already live here, so you may be aware of that. But he's also going to touch upon, some recommendations he might have as you think about moving into a continuing care retirement community that may have, an entry fee associated with it. So I am going to flip it over to Erik.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Sean. So, yes, a few disclaimers really quickly. Obviously, you saw from the previous slide, I work with Raymond James, and we're a member of the New York Stock Exchange and SIPC. And I am not licensed to give tax advice, so and I'm also not an attorney. So make sure if you have questions specific to your own personal financial plans or estate plans, do check with your own planners before you decide to make a move to another state. But that being said, there are definitely a few things that make New Hampshire not only unique, but a really favorable place to retire. And most of those are tax related and a few are estate planning related. We'll get into both of those as we go along here, but we should really start at the top where, no income tax in the state of New Hampshire. So if you're a retiree, whether you're getting your income from your Social Security, pension plan, retirement plans, or a combination of all of those, you're not going to pay income tax on that income. So, in your peak earning years when you're working, it's obviously a big deal to not have to pay those taxes, but it's equally as important in retirement when you're trying to plan out your income streams during that period of your life. So I will mention there's a 5% dividend tax. This is the one footnote that goes along with that no income tax. And that 5% income can be, so you're subject to that on your dividends from stocks and preferred securities and your interest that would come along with bonds and CDs and things of that nature. But good news there too, New Hampshire legislation has already passed a law that will be phased out over the course of the next 5.5 years. So depending on when you get here, that 5% tax may not even apply to you. All right, so we talked about income tax, also no sales tax in New Hampshire. So if you're coming to the state and you think you might have some big purchases in your site, maybe a camper to go traveling with, or some kayaks to explore the Exeter River, wait till you get here before you buy that so you don't have to pay that tax. Another big one, no inheritance tax, and some of our surrounding states cannot boast that same feature, but when you're boiling down your estate plan and looking at the numbers, it can be very advantageous to retire in New Hampshire for that reason. All right, so a lot of people will ask me, how does New Hampshire do it? How do you get away with not having to pay all these taxes? And the simple answer is something that you're probably not going to have to worry about if you're in a CCRC, and that is property taxes, which can be on the high side here, but again, not something you would necessarily be worried about if you're looking at something like Riverwoods. One tax that I will mention is if you like to dine out and see some of these places that Sean mentioned, we are going to hit you with a 9% tax, meals and hospitality tax, and that does cover if you're dining out at a restaurant, that will cover hotel rooms and rental cars. But again, not so bad in the grand scheme of things. Next, let's talk a little bit about estate planning. And whether you end up in New Hampshire or another state for retirement, it's really important that you sit down with your advisors, review your estate plan, and think about updating your documents when you officially move to another state. These are things like your living will, your healthcare directives, HIPAA forms, which allow loved ones to get in touch with your healthcare providers should you be incapacitated. And certainly, and probably tops on the list, is your trusts. If you've taken the time to have a trust drawn up for your assets and put assets inside those trusts, New Hampshire is a place where you can really benefit a lot from those assets inside of a trust. You may have a living trust or an irrevocable trust. You may have heard of generation skipping trusts or kids trusts. The latter are a good thing to have in the state of New Hampshire because we don't have perpetuity laws here, which could really limit what you can do with those kind of trusts. And again, if income is coming out of those trusts to you, again, not taxable here in New Hampshire. So keep that in mind. All right, so in New Hampshire, whether it's titling your property in the name of your trust or in another way, we have seen a couple of horror stories from neighboring states where someone may move here and retire here, but want to keep the family home, let's say, in a trust or in a different different form of ownership to keep in the family. So a Massachusetts family may want to keep that family home for their beneficiaries in future years. You'll have to review that with your estate attorney, but I think it's very important to title that in New Hampshire if it makes sense for your overall plan, because other states will try and attach assets that you own outside of New Hampshire should you pass away in New Hampshire, and therefore your estate will be taxed even though you had everything buttoned up inside of a trust. And again, the number one reason to have a trust is to avoid probate. And a lot of times, if you don't have those assets inside of a trust, a New Hampshire written trust and reviewed trust, then you'll be subject to another state's attempt to claw back some of those estate or inheritance taxes. And then last but not least, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So actually, we just had a question come up. So a trust, if somebody has a trust made in another state like Massachusetts, it needs to be redone for New Hampshire if they move here?
It definitely needs to be reviewed. I won't go out and say it has to be redone, but if you start looking at the numbers, I would think that there's going to be a lot of reasons to move over to a New Hampshire trust if New Hampshire is your permanent state of residence.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. One of the things, if you're moving to a CCRC that I think Lisa alluded to, was a lot of times if you buy in, you have that initial buy-in, you'll want to obviously plan with your financial planners how to have those assets available to you if you're not selling a primary residence to get into a CCRC. So talk to them about having the cash available to make that purchase. A lot of times you might be on a waiting list for a little while, so you'll have plenty of time to plan for that kind of buy-in, but talk to your planners about that. And also, you may have some money coming back to your beneficiaries after that initial buy-in. That's another place that's often forgotten, but when you're signing up with a CCRC, there'll be a place where you can list a beneficiary. Where do my assets go that I'm going to get back as a refund? Where are those going to be going to? And if they're going to your beneficiaries, consider having them go inside of your trust first, so that your successor trustees or whoever's managing that trust may have access to those funds if they need it for future estate settlement. So often overlooked, but again, another important aspect of the overall planning. But again, it's going to be very individual, and it's going to be unique to each individual and each family to come up with those plans. But in a nutshell, that's some of the real benefits of New Hampshire. And we hope to see a lot of you here.
Thank you, Erik. We do have a question. I don't know if you're in a position to answer this one. Does the person getting the inheritance need to be a New Hampshire citizen in order to get the advantage of the lack of inheritance tax?
So there again is the quick answer is I'm not sure, but that's the reason why you want to make sure that, especially if you have a trust, that may be the beneficiary. So if it flows through the trust first and then gets to the beneficiaries, that's where you can usually find the tax benefit. If it goes directly to an individual, you'd have to check with your own tax planners on that.
Great, thank you. All right, so if you have questions for either Erik or Sean, this would be the time to type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We do have a few that have come up that I will address. So one is, does Riverwoods organize any trips to some of these places? We have been known to organize field trips across our 3 communities to some of these places. So part of that is really resident driven and what residents want to go and see, but there's certainly a ton of fun places to go. And we do have transportation buses within each of our communities to provide access to some of those type of field trips. We have a question about, is there a financial assessment review form that I can look at to determine if I could afford a CCRC? Riverwoods has an application process where we can evaluate your financials and let you know what you would qualify for at any of our 3 communities. We don't necessarily have a standard rule of thumb about how much you need in assets or income, because everybody's situation is a little bit different in terms of their asset mix as well as their sources of income. But we can certainly work with you if you are curious about whether you can afford to live in a community like ours. We can certainly work with you on that. So I'm not going to get into the any pricing information of our 3 communities because they're all very different. But we'd be happy to talk to you offline if you're interested, depending upon what community that you're interested in. Sean, I have a question for you. Are Segway tours still a thing in Manchester?
That's a good question. I haven't seen them in a while. There are still plenty of people who have Segways, but I have not seen the tours in a while. They used to offer them too up in the mountains, but I'm going to say that I don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen them in a long time.
Okay. So we have a question. Can you please repeat sources of income not taxed in New Hampshire retirement income?
Yeah, so basically any income that you have coming in is not going to be taxed. So if it's coming from your retirement in the state, okay, of course, you're still going to have to pay federal taxes, but the state of New Hampshire is not going to tax the money that you have coming out of your retirement plans or that you have coming in via a pension or Social Security. Federal taxes are always going to be there, but the state itself is not going to tax those, other than that small dividend we talked about for dividends and income. And there is a little bit of a leeway there. I think you have $4,600 per couple of income that you can have in dividends and interest before they actually start to tax it. And there's also, if you have New Hampshire municipal bonds, which are scarce and hard to come by, but if you do have some of those are also not subject to that 5% dividends and interest tax.
Great.
I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. So we had a question about there's no state income tax in New Hampshire, but there's still a federal income tax, and that would be accurate.
Correct.
Yes, there is. So we have a question for somebody who said their accountant doesn't know anything about the tax benefits of CCRC's entry fee. You may contact us directly. We actually have a document on that, which addresses the possible tax deductions, both on the non-refundable portion of your entry fee, as well as the monthly service fee. I know some people who are asking this question are already on the Riverwoods future resident roster, and you can speak with your sales counselor about getting that information from them.
Lisa, could I interject for a second also?
Sure.
I just wanted to share a personal story. My dad is actually a happy resident of Riverwoods in Exeter, and he's been there about a year. And as we went through the process of looking at different communities, Riverwoods was by far and away the best as far as resources that we could find online on your website. So a lot of times when you're sitting with your planners and talking about retirement in general, what can I afford, what can I afford? You're also going to want to look at the strength of the communities you're considering buying into. It's a very, very big commitment, of course, like you said, in insurance. So work with your advisors, your current advisors, delve into some of that research that's online on the Riverwoods website. Highly recommend it.
Great. Hey, Erik, we have a question about our dividends within an IRA or Roth IRA taxable by New Hampshire.
No, so only if it's going to be taken out. You only pay taxes on dividends and interest inside of an IRA once it's taken out, and then at that point it becomes ordinary income at the federal level, but it's not taxed on a New Hampshire level.
Great. Let's see. So do you know, Erik, what the state tax is on unearned income?
I do not.
I do not either. Okay. So some of these other questions are really relevant more to Riverwoods. There's a question about the range of wait list time among the 3 locations. The wait list time ranges from there is availability now in our Manchester community for certain size of apartments to up to 5 or so years within the Exeter community for certain size apartments. So really depends on what you're looking for in terms of size of residence, as well as the location. But we're happy to talk to you offline about that, depending upon what you're interested in. Okay, any other questions? Let's see. There's a question here about if you're switching Medicare plans, the state does not allow Medigap underwriting screening. Is New Hampshire the same, or is it considering this? I don't know. That's not my area. Erik, I don't know if you have any knowledge on that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be my area of expertise either. But
Okay.
your CPA should be able to find that information out for you.
Okay. Okay. Here's a question about the buy-in, which we call the entry fee for a CCRC. It starts only when one enters the CCRC. That's correct. It's when you are offered a residence and you actually move in, that's when you would pay that entry fee and begin paying those monthly service fees. Question about, does the financial evaluation cost anything? And the answer would be no. That is a complimentary evaluation. And we have a question about, is there a modified plan if you have a robust long-term health care plan? Again, if you have a long-term care insurance, it is redundant of what Riverwoods is offering you, but there can be some advantages to retaining that. It depends on the community, the Riverwoods community in which you're entering. So again, happy to talk to you offline about that, depending upon which community you're interested in. So I don't see any other questions popping up. So we're going to wrap this up. And I want to first thank you, Sean, for providing such a fun summary of kind of the highlights of events and places to go within New Hampshire. And Erik, to you as well for sharing some of those sort of financial advantages of living in the state of New Hampshire, retiring in the state of New Hampshire. This presentation today is going to be recorded. It'll be posted to our website. So you'll have a chance to review this again if there was information that you might have missed or you want to share it with others. It will be up on our website probably within a week or so. And I do want to let you know we have a great event coming up in another month, and it's what you need to know about Medicare. So that'll be on September 28th from 1 to 2 p.m. You'll be able to register on any of the 3 Riverwoods community websites, or you can go to the website here, which is riverwoodsgroup.org/event or events. So thank you again, Sean and Erik. It's been a pleasure to hear your pearls of wisdom. And thank you everybody today for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Have a great day.